Hey everybody, welcome back to the Flatirons Tuning Question of the Week. This week, our question kind of comes from a lot of people. Pretty much every time we say, what do you want to know about, we get this question. It's, what are our top 5 reliability mods we would do?
Yeah.
So John and I, with Viet's help, came up with our own lists of what our top 5 reliability mods are.
Yes. But we do not know what each other's list is.
No.
For my list, I would assume that a lot of people watching this are assuming, well, I need this part, this part, this part, this part.
Yeah.
And in thinking about this, I mean, at least for my list, like there's really not a part on here per se. It's really you as the person that is owning and driving the car. There's things that you should do to make sure that the car is going to be reliable.
Yeah. My list might be personal mods more than actual parts mods.
So, without further ado, let's go to the list.
What's your number 1?
No, what's your number 1?
I'm not going first.
All right, my number 1 is a good tune. And I would emphasize a good tune, a really good tune. That is one of the underlying keys to reliability. Is that basically the mapping of the car is as good as it possibly could be, because if that isn't solid, if that isn't as good as it possibly could be, then you're going to struggle to have a reliable car.
Okay.
All right, what's your number 1?
My number 1 is be happy at the stock power level.
Interesting. Okay. Well, and in some ways, then you're using the Subaru factory tune, which is, if you're at the stock power levels, that is probably the most tested, vetted, and reliable tune that you can have. Now, the internet wouldn't necessarily agree with that in some cases, but like when you get a tune, I mean, the amount of testing and development that goes into the mapping on the car, I mean, that's a big deal. It's the most reliable tune is not necessarily the thing that a tuner puts together one time and works for one pull. It's, the tune that is going to work throughout the seasons, throughout, changes in temperature, pressure, that works at sea level as well as it does at 5,000-6,000 feet. There's usually a lot more testing involved, so I would not disagree with that. All right, what's your number 2?
My second one is change your oil often and don't use garbage oil.
I agree with that. That's actually my number 3, is good oil that is full, which is important.
Yeah. Check and change often.
Check and change often. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with Subarus, good quality fluids are really important. Very, early on when the Subaru WRX landed over here and then the STI, one of the things that the Subaru community discovered really quick was if you're using a synthetic oil that thinned out more quickly as it got hot or aged, that's where oil consumption increased. Like another key consideration is zinc content. A long time ago did a video about various different synthetic oils, but one of the key things for Subarus, because there is so much contact between the cam lobes and the buckets, is having a higher zinc content, which is harder to find these days. But I think if you can find a high zinc content oil like Multiple 8100, Schaefer's, that sort of thing, that helps. And then the full part is not trivial. In modern day and age, I mean, I think we all want to have a car that you put the key in, you turn the ignition, and you just drive it. But especially as you start turning the power up with the Subaru, I mean, you can't just always assume that the oil is full. And that's a big deal, because if you have some kind of an issue going on where you're consuming oil and you end up running a quarter of a quart, half a quart, or even a full quart low, then you can run into problems much more quickly.
Yeah, I'm not sure when we kind of stopped as a community, but philosophy was when I started driving, every time you fill up with gas, you check your oil. Yep. And nobody ever does that anymore. Yeah. I think getting back to that would be kind of a reliability mod.
So since that was my number 3, let me give you what my number 2 was. Mm-hmm. And this to me is the biggest deal that is very easy to overlook. No vacuum leaks. Subarus do not like vacuum leaks. They do not tolerate them well in really any part of the engine, largely to do with the PCB system. But this is one of those things where it's just so important with the Subarus, largely because they're mass airflow based cars. So what that means is that you have your intake and you have your mass airflow sensor. And that sensor is metering all the air that's coming into the engine, but it's right next to the filter. It's right at the beginning of the air's path. If you have any vacuum leaks beyond that, well, now you can have unmetered air that's getting in there, and that can confuse the ECU. Not to mention the fact that with your PCB system, the positive crankcase ventilation system, if those hoses are not sealing correctly or are cracked or what have you, it will create a vacuum leak, which causes an issue in and of itself. And even though it's connected to the crankcase, that is connected to the intake, and so it's a vacuum leak for the intake of the car as well. But then also you have issues with your PCB system, which is a whole other thing which might be on my list, I don't know, next. But yeah, so vacuum leaks are a really big deal, and it cannot be overlooked. So that was my number 2. What is your number 3?
Basically that. My
Okay.
number 3 was replace any hoses or fix any leaks immediately. I mean, there's a reason we sell the full PCV hose kit for every Subaru. Yeah, it was keep up on maintenance, including vacuum leaks.
Yeah, the importance of it cannot be overstated. Turbo engines, they run hotter. If you're tracking the car or if you're making more power, there's more heat there. Rubber hoses, especially small rubber hoses, they tend to get brittle or stiff really quickly, and so that they're not sealing, and that can cause problems. That's 2 and 3. What's your number 4? Go ahead.
My number 4 is don't overdrive the car. Listen to the car. Listen to, how it feels.
Yeah, I mean, if you're giving it wide open throttle from stoplight to stoplight, and you're putting a lot of stress on everything, I mean, that generally will not do well with longevity of the car, the drivetrain, the clutch, axles. I would agree that like pushing the car hard all the time can definitely show you a weak link pretty quickly.
Yeah, and my philosophy there is the car was designed from the factory to handle certain set applications, which is like daily driving. It can handle 100, 200,000 road miles, but not abusive road miles. No car is really designed to handle that much abuse from the factory. So you can do all kinds of mods like get upgraded axles and clutch and diff and all kinds of stuff to beef it up, but you don't necessarily need any of those things if you just drive it like a car.
Well, and maybe in terms of reliability, it would be worth rephrasing that to the extent that to realize that if you're going to drive the car more aggressively or harder, you will expose weak links. And then, so if you want to be able to drive that way and have the car be reliable, you need to address those weak links. The most common application, we had this conversation before as we were making the list, is, well, this is based around a daily driver in theory. But I mean, I've seen people that daily drive their cars pretty hard. I mean, that's a thing out there. But it's the same if you're going to drive the car at the track a bunch. I mean, this is what we keep running into with our race cars is, you're wanting to drive the car as hard as you can, go as fast as you can, and then you find a weak link.
There's a possibility that those are going to be different per car, per driver. If somebody goes to the track, they might expose a weak link that somebody else has never seen before.
For sure. I mean, it's, guys that are doing a lot of launches. I guess spoilers-ish, but Subarus don't really like launching that much, especially WRXs. WRXs really do not tolerate it well. And so then you're probably going to find weak links largely in the transmission, I would guess, but possibly axle-wise, possibly in the clutch. So if that's what you're doing with the car a lot, just be aware that you're going to find those weak links and you need to address it. So, and kind of spoilers, we've talked about it, but like I said, my next one is a properly functioning PCV system. And so when I say that, I mean, it could be stock, it could be with a catch can or catch cans, it could be with an air oil separator, but it needs to be functioning properly. And so no vacuum leakage is a big part of that. But the reason that I put that on there is that, again, like if you have a PCV system that is not functioning properly, there's going to be a lot more oil going through the inlet track through the PCV system in general. That can cause issues all on its own. And I would say this, that there have been engines that have been replaced because it seemed like they had a bigger issue, but it was actually down to a non-properly functioning PCV system. If you're going to keep the car reliable, making sure that the PCV system is functioning properly is a really big piece of that, because you don't want the oil moving through the intake, and you also don't want to have something that's more of a simple issue that would make you think that you have a much, much bigger issue that would require, tearing the engine apart and doing that sort of thing.
So my last one is kind of related. It's like a properly functioning oil system.
Yeah.
Up to dry sump.
Up to a dry sump.
I mean, realistically, there's a good reason that Porsches come from the factory with a dry sump.
Yeah.
Even daily driven Porsche or stock power level, whatever you want to say, they have a dry sump. And our cars would benefit a lot from that from the factory. We have aftermarket options, but just making sure the oil system is completely, set up properly, sealed, and not burning oil, maybe not consuming it through the PCB system.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. The oiling system is super important.
I would say that the optimal oil pump for a Subaru engine, especially a modified one, is a dry sump oiling system. But you can't really add a dry sump and keep the car practical as a daily driver. So I think that I would have to say, like, Subaru, well, and I guess they've killed off the STI, so it's probably never going to happen at this point. But if they were ever to make the car like really a much more serious track car, they would have to put a dry sump on there. But there's still a lot that can be done with the oiling system, the stock oiling system. But yeah, it definitely needs to be functioning. That is for sure. So good oil, good oiling system, good PCV system, no vacuum leaks. Yeah, I mean those are really the keys. I mean, I wish that there was parts. I mean, and there are parts that are part of that, and I think we all want a list of parts, because then it's easy to just go through a catalog or our website and just pick off these 5 things that you bolt all of these on, and then the car is immediately going to be more reliable. But really, it's just it comes to paying attention to all these details. The details are the key piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my number 5 is kind of like, I guess your number 1, 350 horsepower or less. So I was thinking in terms of daily driving. The lower your power goal, the easier it is to keep the car reliable. The more you increase the power, the more challenging it can be to keep the car reliable. Just like we were talking about, if you're driving the car aggressively, you're going to find a weak link, and then you need to address the weak link. The more and more power that you add to the car, can you have a 500 horsepower WRX STI that is daily drivable and reliable? The answer is yes. But there's probably going to be even more steps that you would have to follow. And you definitely have to follow all these details that we've laid out to keep the car reliable. And you might well run into more issues or more complexity to keep the car reliable. So it's the easier it will be to keep the car reliable if the power is lower. Now, I will say this. I have one asterisk. I had one other thing that I had on the list and then took it off because I realized the PCV system is more important.
Okay.
But relevant to one of our recent videos, I'm going to say the last thing is proper coolant caps or proper radiator caps. Yeah. Because that is not a small deal. And now that we kind of know more and have a clearer picture of those details, it's even more apparent how important the correct radiator caps is to keeping your car reliable.
So I also have an asterisk.
An honorable mention. Okay.
One that I couldn't quite decide.
Okay.
I put the dry sump on there because I wanted to talk about the oiling system.
Yeah.
But kind of broader thinking here, be really careful if you're going to buy a used Subaru.
Yeah.
Because
for sure.
starting from stock, starting from brand new, you know how it's been driven because you're the one driving it. You know how it's been taken care of. You can make sure the maintenance has been done.
Mm-hmm.
If you're buying a used Subaru, particularly one that doesn't have all the maintenance paperwork or, kind of an iffy history, do a lot of checks on it. Make sure that there's no signs that the oiling system was compromised at some time.
You have to be really careful, especially if you're not buying the car from the previous owner. Like if you're buying a car from a dealership or on a lot where the history of the car, the maintenance on the car is an unknown, there's a lot of questions there that would you need to get answered. And so yeah, definitely be careful buying a new Subaru. That's where getting a good experience shop to go through the car or look at the car is really critical.
Well, hopefully that was helpful and we didn't crush your dreams of an awesome parts list to make your Subaru impeccable. But that's been our question of the week this week, and We do these every week. Submit your questions in the comments below or on Instagram.
Yeah. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for your support as always. Greatly appreciated. And until next time, as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.